Welcome to the Health Science Coach Podcast. My name is Drew Garner, and I'm a health science and physical education teacher. This is a podcast to help students, parents, and recent graduates learn about pathways into healthcare and sports medicine careers. These industry professionals lay out how their experiences have helped them get to where they are now. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel or download through your podcast player. Thanks again for spending some time with us today. Now let's dig in. Welcome to the 52nd episode of the Health Science Coach Podcast. Today I get the pleasure of interviewing Jessica Jantz. She is a registered dietitian and founder of Sustained Roots. Jessica considers herself to be a personal nutritional detective and a root cause solution finder. She helps people who are struggling with inflammatory symptoms and who feel stuck and frustrated about not being able to find something that works for them in the long term. We're working hard against a strong family history of diabetes, obesity, and other chronic inflammatory diseases don't have to be so difficult. Together, she and you will be able to unlock secrets that have kept you from reaching your nutritional and wellness goals. Welcome, Jessica. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Drew. I'm excited to share.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on and spending an hour with us this afternoon. So a little background about us, you and me met at Benedictine our freshman year in college, both played sports there. Let's talk a little bit first about how you kind of chose Benedictine as a college to go to as far as sports and that kind of recruiting process, and then how that led to you to your passion for nutrition.
Yeah, so I played soccer for about 14 years. And in high school, towards my senior year, really started, applying for, colleges and during my games, recruiters and coaches would come out and look at look at how I was doing in those games, et cetera, to see if they could offer scholarships, which was nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time. But Benedictine was one that offered me an academic and soccer scholarship. And, I went and visited a few campuses to see what I liked and what I didn't like. And Benedictine definitely stood out to me. They have a really good biology program, which is the direction that I wanted to go. At that time, I was pre-med, or I thought maybe I wanted to be a veterinarian also. So somewhere in that area of biology. And I knew that they had a good program. It's also a smaller school, which I felt more comfortable at versus going to a larger state school at the time. And they had a great soccer program. I liked the coach a lot. So there's a lot of different kind of factors that played into that decision. It's also in Atchison, Kansas, which is only about 45 minutes away from home. So far enough, but not too far away from family.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty good. So throughout your time there, you kind of, like you said, thought you wanted to do pre-med or veterinary, something medical field, bio-related. What kind of led you to wanting to be a nutritionist, a dietitian?
Yeah, so at the time, whenever I was playing soccer, I really started to take notice of how food affected my performance. And in all honesty, I didn't have a huge passion for good nutrition in high school and even into my early college years. And then once, I started paying more attention and really noticed how, the foods that I was eating for the previous meals or even the day before gave me more energy, sustained energy for my games and really helped, my performance. Then I started researching it more and studying nutrition. And at that time, Benedictine didn't have a dietetics program, but they did offer a nutrition 101 class. And so I signed up for that and just learning all the ins and outs as far as nutrition, the vitamins and minerals and macronutrients. And I just found it really fascinating, and it kind of spoke to me and pulled me in that direction. So I made the decision to switch over to that area.
Very interesting. So talking about being a registered dietitian, you just recently started your own company. Let's talk a little bit about your process of, going from the industry and working in a corporation or other business to, starting your own business and what you do on maybe a daily or weekly basis.
Yeah, so it was an evolved process, I would say. It just kind of happened because I started really noticing what gave me the most joy, I guess, in working with people, and my own struggles that I've had with inflammatory issues and thyroid and so on. But working with even close friends and family members and really seeing the impact that integrative and functional nutrition had on them made me want to move into a private practice so I could help more people. And so it's been a slow kind of transition, but I hired a business coach at the time and really helped me kind of niche down into who I wanted to help. And that program also helped put me on the path towards next steps, right? And so I created my main program for my business, which is a 3-month coaching program. And I had the support there from not only her, but other dietitians going through similar similar situations, so we could bounce back ideas and feedback on each other. So that's what started it. And then I hired a web designer and a copywriter because there's just so much that goes into kind of putting yourself out there and hit the ground running. So I decided to do that, and fortunately, I was able to do that financially. So I made that decision, and then from there, I filed with the state with my business name, and I had applied for a MPI, a national provider number for being a dietitian. And then I, submitted for, a number with IRS. So there's all these processes of that. And then also applying for different insurance companies and Medicare for coverage down the road as well. So as I said, it's kind of evolved right now, seeing clients one-on-one, and then I'm starting some group workshops here.
Okay, awesome. So it really sounds like hiring that business person really helped in setting out the pathway of what you needed to do and the specific steps to get that business started. That's awesome.
Yes.
And we'll get more into sustained root here in a little bit. But to become a registered dietitian, you have to go to school after undergraduate, and you chose to go to San Diego State University to get your certification from there. What did that program kind of look like as far as classes taken, internships, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I started after I left Benedictine my 4th year of college, which was kind of crazy looking back at it. But I actually went to CMSU, Central Missouri State University, for a semester because they had a dietetics program. So I jumped in there, and then I studied abroad, and then I ended up at San Diego State to finish out my program. So I don't really recommend this to everybody, but it took me 7 years to get my undergrad. But I had a lot of experience in there too, with traveling and so on. Yeah. So, but San Diego State was amazing. The campus was awesome, as you can imagine. But a lot of different classes, from like food science to application of nutrition, even like cultural food classes. I mean, there's so many classes that go into being like the dietetics program. I think if someone were interested, looking up some of these state schools and seeing what's involved and kind of what the classes are would be a good idea. But there's, chemistry, biology were kind of the foundation for those things. And then it got more specific after that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So after you graduated with your undergrad, you started working as a registered dietitian. You've had a couple different jobs with different companies.
Yeah.
What are some of the kind of like takeaways that you had from advancing your career, moving from job or position to different position as a registered dietitian in the clinical setting, maybe in the hospital, as well as the other companies that you kind of worked for?
So I started off in clinical, which I do recommend for most dietitians just starting off, because it gives you a good base and foundation for different disease states. Because as a dietitian, you really are a food and nutrition expert. And so you're translating the science that's out there around nutrition. And, all of these disease states have different nutrition recommendations, and then helping people apply that to their life and to what their goals are for what their doctor prescribes them. As in the hospital setting, I work with a variety of disease states, like heart disease, and even cancer and diabetes, and in the ICU, and calculating tube feeds. So there's just a big variety, of patients that we get to work with. So my biggest takeaway from working clinically was just that broad knowledge that I gained in order to figure out what I really wanted to focus on. Because whenever you get a little bit of, these different areas, you can see what drives you, what you're most passionate about. And at that time, I found that it was more diabetes related. And so that's when I moved to the diabetes field after that.
Absolutely. So after you've been a registered dietitian for 9 years before you moved on, but then you kind of took a different path and became a medical sales rep. What kind of led towards that development and kind of slight change of career?
Yeah, and I tell, whenever I am working with interns for nutrition and dietetics, I always tell them, just keep your mind open. And one of the big reasons why I love nutrition and I love being a dietitian is because you never really know where it's going to take you. And I was working in a family practice at the time as a dietitian and their main diabetes educator. And I was exposed to medical technology, whether it's continuous glucose monitors or insulin pumps, and seeing the results that patients at the time had on these. It just was truly life-changing, especially, people with type 1 diabetes, even type 2 that were insulin dependent. Getting on an insulin pump just made the world of a difference, and with their numbers, how they felt. And so I was approached during that time with a job opening, being kind of like the clinical rep for an insulin pump company. And so I was already training some patients in the office on insulin pumps. And so it was just kind of a next step as far as transition. So I started off training people around. I covered Kansas City and all of Kansas. So I would travel and then, train people whenever they got started on their pumps, and then had clinical conversations with diabetes educators and nurses and doctors, endocrinologists. And then I had a sales rep partner. She left, and then I made the decision that I wanted to try and kind of jump into that role next. And at the time, my manager was gracious enough to let me try it. And so that I went into a medical sales role. So, which obviously was never, like, looking back in high school and college, I would have never imagined myself there, but it was one of the best experiences that I've had. It definitely put me out of my comfort zone, because not a lot of people are naturally, good sellers, quote unquote, but it was amazing because it was coming also from my clinical background. So I didn't really feel as much like selling.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. When you're dealing with something that you're passionate about, being the insulin pumps, you're able to know and understand the importance of what they are, and kind of sell those features of the pump and what it can do for the patient. So I think that's a big something to think about when you're, like you said, always leave your door open and just kind of see how path can develop. So then with that, after you did that for 4 years, working with that company ended up as a territory manager. This is where Sustained Root kind of broke off, and you were able to start your private practice, right?
Yes. Yes. And it's one thing that I'm a big believer in, is just continuing to follow your passion. And every different phase of life, that can change. So that really brought me joy being in that field for many years. However, I started to feel this pull more towards getting back to working with people one-on-one for nutrition and helping them overcome health symptoms that they were having. And so, yes, I made the tough decision to leave that position and then get back into integrative and functional nutrition and, being in diabetes education, et cetera.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So then with Sustained Root, we kind of hit on it a little bit, and I'd like to find out some more about what you do. So you work with patients in Kansas and Missouri. You're licensed in Kansas and Missouri. And then you said you had just started with a patient in California. How are you able to work with different people in different states? How does that kind of work out?
Yeah, so it all just depends on where you're licensed. Dietitians, we have a national license. Um, and then we also have specific state licensure as well. So, and each state has different requirements for their licensure. It could take, a couple weeks to a few months to get each one. So you really just can't see anybody and everybody. They have to live in that state. But California is different because they don't require state licensure. So I'm able to see people there as well.
Okay, that's interesting. And is that basically if you wanted to work with somebody in, say, Nebraska, you would just go to the Nebraska State Department, find the licensure application and submit, or is it a
And
little more
apply. Yeah,
complicated?
you apply. Some of them require background checks, fingerprinting. They also want to look. I've had to send in my transcripts from San Diego State as well to a couple of them. And, then they want to know continuing education units. Part of being a dietitian, too, I think we kind of touched on that is not only do you have to have a degree in nutrition, but you also have to complete an internship that's about 6 to 12 months. Then you have to take a national exam. And then after that, you have to have 75 units of continuing education every 5 years. So,
Okay.
depending on the state, some of them wanted to see proof that you've had continuing education. So, that was another
Yeah.
piece of it, too.
Yeah. 75 hours is, I mean, in 5 years, it's not a lot for 5 years, but you say 75 at once, it kind of seems like a lot. Continuing ed is one of the things that I wanted to talk on next a little bit. What are some of the things that you've been seeing that are maybe some trends in continuing education for diabetic care?
For diabetes specifically, for continuing education, I think, people are really wanting to move into, more of like a mindful eating and intuitive eating approach just for nutrition in general. And I think that it can play into diabetes as well. A lot of people with diabetes feel overwhelmed because they have a lot of information coming in at once, and then maybe they've Googled a few things and, they're not really sure what to eat. So I think for diabetes nutrition, it's helpful to have them understand which foods affect their blood sugar, right? And those are carbohydrates, but also know that it's a lifelong journey. Just like any changes to, nutrition, you have to make that decision that you want to make, long-term lifestyle change. And if you can incorporate more mindful eating practices. So what that looks like is, slowing down when you're eating, being more present, listening to your hunger cues, asking yourself, am I really hungry, or am I eating this more out of emotion? Is really powerful. And not just, like I said, for diabetes, for anybody wanting to lose weight or get closer to their goals. Another trend is going more towards integrative and functional nutrition. So
Okay.
integrative and functional medicine really focuses on the whole person, versus different sides. So, how you have a specialist for ear, nose, and throat, and you have an endocrinologist, and then you have a liver specialist and a heart specialist, and all these different specialists. For integrative nutrition, it kind of looks at the whole body, right? And how everything's connected. And a lot of it goes back to gut health and how it affects our overall health, how it affects our absorption of nutrients, some of the symptoms that we're having. For diabetes, looking at the hormones involved in there and how the food that we're eating is affecting our blood sugars and affecting our hormones. So getting to the root cause of the problem, which for pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance. So helping people understand what that is and that it's possible to reverse it is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense with, looking at the body as a whole, not just what you eat to reach your goal, whether that's gain muscle mass, be better at your sport, or lose weight. By seeing how everything affects, if you eat peanuts, how that affects inflammation or whatever it could be,
Mhm.
as the whole. So, what do you think some misconceptions are out there about being a dietitian?
Um, that we're food police is one that you commonly hear. I know, like, whenever I was working in the hospital, like, I would see people and they would just turn away, like they didn't want me to see what they were eating. Like, I really don't care, I focus on people that want my help, so I'm not judging you, and I don't judge anybody that I work with. I think coming at it from I'm here to support you, whatever that may look like, and what good would it be if I judged you? So that's one misconception that I would say. Another one is that dietitians are the same thing as a nutritionist. A registered dietitian, as I mentioned before, has a lot of educational requirements, and going through that internship, getting nationally certified, and doing the continuing education credits. And we can use medical nutrition therapy. So, really applying nutrition to help reach a person's goal, but also to help decrease the symptoms of their chronic disease. Versus a nutritionist, I mean, anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. So, just be really careful with who you're working with out there. And, they do have some online programs that you can take, but none of that really compares to the schooling and like the educational background that a registered dietitian has to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. Just because I've read some books on nutrition, being a health teacher,
Yeah, I'm
just
sure.
people ask me questions. I'm like, I'm not certified. I'm not anything, but this book says this. So if
Yeah.
you this book, feel free to. Um, and you kind of mentioned earlier that you work with people that want your help, and the food police is coming. They'll turn their head, move out of the way. What did you kind of notice with people that didn't they were told what they should be eating, but didn't really follow it, and how they're kind of either their people around them or themselves kind of take that as a not serious or serious kind of recommendations as far as the foods versus people that had made that conscious decision to say, okay, this is what the doctor says, this is what the nutritionist says, it is time for me to do XYZ to help myself.
Yeah. Goes back to behavior change, which is one of the hardest things that people can do. It's not easy. And I think it just all depends on where people are at. Unfortunately, some of us wait until, we get a diagnosis of diabetes, for example, or, something happens with our health, like heart attack, stroke, etc. It doesn't have to get there, and I think just recognizing the importance of making those changes now can help not only prevent that, but help some of the symptoms that you may be experiencing that you've ignored for so long. So, we do use some like ways to help motivate people. In the hospital setting, it's difficult because they are there for a short time. I think the average stay was a few days. So if you might see them once and then you won't ever see them again, and you just hope that they'll continue on the journey or make a follow-up appointment with outpatient dietitian, et cetera. So that can be a little bit more challenging. But the people that I see now generally come to me pretty motivated. I have a process set up where I'll have a quick like 15-30 minute introductory call. And so we'll talk about the symptoms that they're experiencing, and where they're at now in their lives and where they want to be, and what that looks like. And for me, one of my favorite things to do is just really help people embody their why they're doing it in the first place, because all of us have a different why that drives us, whether it's career or health changes or, a lot of different things in our lives. So I think if we can get to the bottom of that, then it helps kind of catapult people towards wanting to make health changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, being a health teacher and a coach and an athlete, former athlete, um, don't call myself an athlete anymore, really. Heavy exerciser.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go.
Coming off of triathlons, I would eat, and I still kind of do whatever I want, whenever I want, but I
Mhm.
also probably exercise quite a bit more than the most typical person. Just by nature of being a health and PE teacher, I teach swimming, I coach golf, I run, I bike, I swim, lift weights, all the stuff. You know, at some point, I'm going to not be able to do all that. As for someone like me that hits that point and realizes, okay, now I can't eat what I normally eat, what are some tips or cues that you might kind of talk with somebody like that about?
You mean when they're like transitioning from, yeah. I think it's less like tuning in and listening to our bodies, right? Because um a lot of us, especially like during high school and college, we are fortunate enough to eat a lot of things that we probably can't tolerate later on in life. And so it's important to recognize those kind of phases of life and what, inflammation looks like. And, whenever we start to see changes in our energy levels, for instance, recognizing that is likely related to the food that we're eating, or maybe the stress that we're under, or the sleep that we're not getting. And so I think just helping people connect the dots there and know that it's common, but it's not normal, right? And that at that time is critical. And figuring out the nutrition plan that works best for you. I don't believe in a one size fits all nutrition and diet plan for everybody. And so I really work with people where they're at and their likes and dislikes, and kind of figure out a personalized plan for them. Because a lot of things go into that, whether it's our genetics and then, environmental and what our goals are.
Yeah. So when you bring on a new client, what are kind of some of the steps that, you said that 20, 30-minute introductory call with somebody. What are some of the testing procedures that you do with a new person or new client that maybe, you have that introductory call with them, and then what are the next steps?
Yeah, so the next steps, I would schedule our initial consultation, which is generally it's longer. I'd say on average it's about 75 minutes or so. I have them fill out some intake forms as well. That takes a deep dive into their health and medical history. I do look at their labs, and so if they can get labs drawn, if they haven't done them in a while, at their main provider office or their primary care provider, that's helpful, because then we can get a baseline of where they're at. And I also ask for a 3-day food record. And so they record that, and then I can see trends. 3 days isn't a long time, but it's enough to give me a peek into kind of what they're doing currently as far as nutrition goes. And
Right.
I take that information, and during our first visit, we really review everything. I ask a lot of questions, and I pry a little bit about when symptoms started, and even if it goes years back, trying to figure out maybe what was the root cause of those symptoms, the symptoms that they're having. And so we spend more time during that first visit, and then I set them up with kind of a initial plan of action there. And so we come up with a couple of goals. The first visit, we usually go over nutrition information. I like to focus more on, food as nourishment, food as medicine. And so what they're doing now and what their plate should look like, as far as just like a general starting place. And then we come up with some very specific goals to move them in that direction: specific, achievable, measurable, the SMART goals that come along with that. And then for my 3-month coaching program, I do offer different functional lab tests. A lot of them will do it's called a GI map, and we are able to look at the gut basically, and the bacteria and any infections or parasites people might be having, inflammatory markers, et cetera. So it really gives us a peek inside to see what the health is of their gut. But I also offer a couple other functional lab tests as well. So that one's a stool test, which is always, interesting for people. But then there's a couple of blood tests in there too, if people prefer not to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So then typically, how often do you meet with a patient?
I like to meet with people every 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes to see some changes kind of going through there as well as to implement the change also.
Yeah, exactly. And when I do start accepting insurance, and then, even Medicare, the insurance companies set those guidelines too. Sometimes I might only be able to see somebody, 6 visits a year. And so then we need to figure out the spacing of those. But especially when we first start together and we're doing those the testing every 2 weeks is a good start, because they have time, like you said, to implement change. And then we're getting some of those results back that we can go over together and put a plan in place around those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of talked about it a little bit, and I want to just brush on it again. When you kind of made that decision to start your own company, what was it that kind of made you feel the most personal rewarding of working with your patients and your specific niche of clients?
The results, I'm very results driven, and seeing the progress that they've made. I mean, it can make my day by a client texting me, and telling me that they have more energy or that they have less pain. I had a client here last week that's had insomnia, so she hasn't been able to sleep for years, and she told me she was actually sleeping. I mean, those types of results are huge. Or somebody that is doesn't want to check their blood sugars, but they have diabetes and they have a high A1C, which that is that average 3-month blood sugar when they go into their doctor's office. Well, having that conversation, helping them understand why it's so important. And it's really not that big of a deal compared to what they think it is, and so help them overcome barriers so that they're taking better care of themselves. And then when I see them, they're checking blood sugars, or they're wearing a continuous glucose monitor, and they're really taking a part of their own health, is really rewarding, because those are things that are going to last. And when they can see those improvements, then it's only going to add more, ammunition as far as wanting to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's hits it right on the head right there. So after being a registered dietitian now for a couple of years, you've been able to put some stuff and develop different programs and work with different industry people. What's something that you're kind of most proud of achieving? That could be starting your company, being a sales territory manager, anything up there. I think it was a big accomplishment for yourself.
Yes, I mean, I've along the way, I've had several. The biggest first one was to become a registered dietitian, because that test is not easy, and it's like all the work that you pour and all the years that go into that. Like I said, I took 7 years to get my undergrad, and I just promised my parents I was going to finish school. They were just like, please, whatever you do, finish. I was like, I promise. So all of those, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that, and to pass that exam was just one of the best feelings. So that was definitely a big moment that I was proud. And then also, again, getting it's called CDCES now, Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist, which is a diabetes educator. I had to take another big national exam. And I just remember walking out of there, and I was tearful, because there's just all, this flood of joy and relief that came after that. And then at this point, starting my own private practice it wasn't an easy decision, because it's not an easy journey. It's a lot of hard work, and launching any company is a lot of hard work. And I've learned a lot, and I'm sure I'll continue to learn. But I'm just trying to stay true to who I am and kind of where I want to be, and following my passion, no matter what that looks like to anybody else.
Yeah, I like that. Being able to, draw your own line and have that as your goal. So that's looking at what you've accomplished. Now let's look at kind of where you kind of see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years. Obviously, you just started Sustained Root. Where do you kind of see yourself growing off from there?
With nutrition, the sky's the limit. I don't know. I just want to move full time into my private practice and have a full schedule, but be able at the same time to do the things that I love to do on my own set schedule. And I have two, small kiddos. So being able to have that balance in my life, as far as career wise, I think, this is just the beginning. So I want to do more one-on-one coaching, but also develop group programs so that I can help more people, on a larger basis. So my mind's open. I'm leaving it open to whatever that may look like. And, whatever I get invited to, I've just been practicing saying yes.
I like that. Practice saying yes. Um, what do you wish you would have known in high school or maybe early on at your first couple of years at Benedictine that would have helped you with your career now?
I think a lot of high school kids, myself included, and when I was in college, we put pressure on ourselves to really try and figure out what we're going to do with the rest of our lives at that time, and we feel like we have to have it figured out. And so I think looking back on it, just knowing that if you just have this glimpse of passion towards something, and if you have a strong interest, or maybe it's helped you, overcome a health problem, or helped you in another way, follow that, and just kind of see what happens. When you go into college, I picked biology because it's, you can go in a bunch of different places, with that degree, and so you don't have to know it all at that time. It's just you just kind of have to pick, and if you're somewhat interested in it, then just see where it goes, because you can always change.
Yeah.
You can always change, and it probably will change over time, and that's okay. That's normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of a change of how we've started doing things. When we were in high school, we didn't have the career and technical education pathways that we have available now in the state of Kansas and Missouri. So our health science pathway, which this is, kids are able to come in and take classes in my pathway, or in marketing, or in culinary, and kind of get a little glimpse of what each one of those are in high school, which is pretty cool, and then
It's
something that
amazing.
didn't have. Um,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you can get just a glimpse on a day, like a typical day in the life, I mean, that's huge. I do recommend, if you could, if people are interested in nutrition, reach out to a dietitian and see if you can shadow them for a day, and see what it's all about.
yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the next portion of the questions. Is we have 3 or 4 different advice kind of questions. We're going to talk about advice for a high school student, undergraduate student, someone that is getting ready to graduate and start looking for a job, and then advice for somebody that is working as a dietitian for that first initial job, 3 to 6 months. So, like you were mentioning just then, if you're a hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Okay, I went disappeared for a second. Is there any
You're back.
is there any other advice that you would recommend for a high school student that is or thinking about registered dietitian in their future?
Yeah, I would, like I mentioned, see if they could shadow a dietitian, can be really powerful, or maybe even just call and talk to one, and
Yeah,
see kind of what they do, and maybe if you have a specific area that you're interested in, because as a dietitian, you can go down, a lot of different routes. You could be a sports dietitian, or you could work, in this field, you could work with diabetes, or you could work with children and pediatrics. So I would just ask if you could kind of do a short interview with them and start picking their brain a little bit about what they do. And then also just be on the lookout for colleges that offer nutrition programs as well, because there aren't, tons. Not every college offers a dietetics program. So if you're interested in going in that direction, just make sure that that's on your radar as well.
yeah, absolutely. And then somebody that is a freshman, sophomore in college that, takes that nutrition 101 class kind of that you talked about and starts to think, that might be something that they want to do as far as become a registered dietitian. What other advice would you have for them as far as maybe internships or summer jobs that they could look for that would help them get some experience?
Yeah, good question. So I started working in the food service department in the hospital that was close to my college at the time. And that turned out to be one of the best things I did because although at the time it wasn't super exciting, I would go around and ask people what they wanted for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It did give me the opportunity to meet the dietitians, because
Yeah.
they work in the food department, food service department. And so I got to see what they did. And then also it set me up for meeting my manager, who is also a preceptor for the dietetic internship that I was accepted to. So as a dietitian, you have to apply to different internships. And that's another thing that they are selective. And if you can get the experience any way that you can for food and nutrition and working alongside dietitians, that's going to be a big resume builder.
Right, absolutely. Like you said, just networking, meeting that preceptor that
Mhm.
you had, having that experience working with them before your actual internship. So now let's look at someone that is getting ready to graduate from college. Maybe they're 3 to 4 months away from graduating. They're taking their last courses. What kind of things should they be doing as far as maybe looking for companies to work for, building the resumes, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So after college, you do have about a year in there that you jump into your internship with. And then that's when you get your most experience because you're doing different rotations in the field. You're working in the clinical and then, maybe you're working in outpatient. Or all different types of fields so you can get a feel on what you want to do. But I think it's a good idea for people to start off in as a clinical dietitian. The jobs are out there, whether it's part-time or just kind of as needed. But like I mentioned before, it can really just provide a good foundation and of knowledge that you need because you never know when you're going to, for instance, when I worked at the family practice, I would see people mostly for diabetes, but every once in a while I'd get somebody that came in on a tube feed. And I knew how to do that because I had worked in that environment before.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's look at a registered dietitian that has already been working for 3 to 6 months. Who should they kind of be talking to, learning from? What experiences or questions should they be looking for as far as getting better at their job?
Yeah, I think that, networking with other dietitians is important. I know in Kansas City, my journey towards integrative and functional nutrition, because being a registered dietitian, you don't really get a lot of it, knowledge. Or when I was in school, I didn't really have a lot of education on integrative and functional nutrition, which is again kind of looking at the root cause of chronic disease. I found a group of dietitians that were in that specific area, and we would have journal club meetups once a
Okay.
month. And so I started going to those and just learning. I mean, the knowledge that these women had on a variety of topics was just amazing and eye-opening. And so being able to see them working in different fields, it was inspiring. So I think finding a group of other dietitians or even one other dietitian, and kind of working alongside of them and see what they do and just having those conversations for support. Also, just keep an open mind and start listening to different podcasts or reading different books on areas that interest you. And if you want to expand and move in those directions, then I think it's important to educate yourself more, first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of books, do you have any book recommendations someone might check out if they were interested in getting into becoming a registered dietitian?
I was thinking about this. There's so many, there's so many nutrition books out there. And then it just depends on where people want to go. I know when I was in my internship, I read The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. I don't know if you've read that one before, but it really is. It's a good. It gives information as far as the question, what should I be eating, right? And it goes back and it looks where our food came from, back before when we were hunter gatherers compared to now with industrialized society. And I think if people can understand how our food is processed, and what we should be putting on our plate, that can be really powerful. And so that one was a good one for me. Another one is there's an online magazine called Today's Dietitian,
Okay.
and there are numerous articles on there written by dietitians. There's different recipes. There's a lot of different resources that they can look at. And then lastly, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. It's at eatright.org, and they can go on there and have a lot of questions answered as far as what it's like to be a dietitian, why you should see a dietitian, what does a dietitian do, and some different resources as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely put some links to those in the comments below. Um, do you have any, I guess, products that you may use on a daily basis? I know your phone or your calendar is probably something that you can hand and have a good record of. But as a dietitian, what are some tools, I guess, that you use on a regular basis that you would recommend?
So, as a dietitian, you have to do everything HIPAA compliant. So, you have to protect the rights of protect the privacy of the clients that you're seeing. And so, I do all of my appointments and charting through an electronic health record. And there's a few of them out there that you can choose from as a dietitian. So I use that often. I schedule my appointments through there. I upload documents and education through there, and I have my meetings through there because everything is secure. So that's one of the big ones that I use. And then I also have a kind of a supplement storefront that I use as well. That's called Full Script, and I know that the supplements from there are all premium grade, pharmaceutical grade. Everything's been researched, and so whenever people are looking for supplements, I have specific ones that I point them to, because it's important to know that what they're spending money on is actually what's supposed to be in those, right? Because
Right.
unfortunately, we can go to some of these big stores and get something on the shelf, and it might not be, what it has listed might not be an accurate representation of what's actually in it.
Right. Absolutely. Especially from the drug standpoint, being certified and tested is something that's very important. Um, let's talk about likes and dislikes. So, our athletic trainer came up with this question for us, and she said that as an athletic trainer, if you dislike feet, then being an athletic trainer is not the career path for you. And being a former soccer player, you would understand that. Uh,
Yeah.
touching and wrapping and all that kind of stuff. So if you dislike blank, being a registered dietitian is not the right career path for you.
I would say if you dislike healthy eating, or eating your vegetables, because it's going to be hard to recommend that towards for other people if you're not eating that way and following that lifestyle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can completely agree with that. And then if you do like blank, being a registered dietitian could be the right career path for you.
So there is a lot of science involved when it comes to nutrition. And even today, I'm constantly looking at the research. So if you are interested in science and you like helping people and you're interested in, food and what it does to the body, then definitely could be a path for you.
Absolutely. And last question I have for you is, if do you have a mantra or quote that you like to live your professional work life through?
Yeah, I have this framed quote by Eleanor Roosevelt that I've had for years and years. Do one thing every day that scares you. And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in kind of getting outside of your comfort zone. And if you're doing something that you kind of get butterflies over or you're kind of scared about, then you're moving in the right path. I mean, towards your career, there's other things obviously that you shouldn't be doing. I need to clarify that. But,
Right.
just like public speaking or doing a workshop or going to a college campus by yourself, some of those things might be scary, intimidating, or even reaching out to a dietitian and asking, hey, can I spend like an hour with you, but just taking the initiative has big payoffs in many different ways. So continuing to do that all throughout your career, and it'll just open up so many doors that you wouldn't imagine possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today and talking about your company's Sustained Root. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, it's been a pleasure. I'm excited. We need more people in nutrition and dietetics. So hopefully this has helped inspired some to go in that direction. And I can be a resource too. So if anybody has further questions, they can reach out to me.
Thank you so much again. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, Drew.
If you've made it this far into the episode, I want to thank you again for watching. Please subscribe, share, and comment below with any questions or comments you may have. If you're interested in more information about other professions within healthcare careers, please visit healthsciencecoach.com and talk to your school counselor or academic advisor. As always, stay happy, healthy, and live life with passion.